Welcome to I Can't with Dr. T, a place where we share in discussions, affirmations, and learning moments. You can reach us on social media at Dr. T Medley, that's at DrTmedley, on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. You can reach us on the web at www.drtmedley.com or by email at info@drtmedley.com. That's info@drtmedley.com. Welcome to the show. Hello. Welcome back to I Can't with Dr. T. It is Dr. T once again coming to you all with another episode of I Can't. And we have an amazing guest for you today. I want to thank you all for coming back to share with us after commemorating Juneteenth here in Texas. It has been a hot month so far for us, and we've got a hot episode ready to go for you today. And we have sort of an informal series going on, and I think, today's guest is going to be an amazing addition to that informal series of boss women of worth. So we've got an amazing boss woman of worth on for our conversation today by the name of Dr. LaDrina Wilson. And I'm going to read you a bit of her bio because this lady has done a lot, right? So Dr. Wilson is founder of Iman Consulting. She spent over 15 years breaking down barriers and building paths to access for students in the world of higher education. Her work in community college leadership has created opportunities to partner with a wide range of businesses in a variety of different industries to tackle community issues such as the achievement gap, skilled workforce challenges, and talent attraction and retention. And I assume part of that is diverse talent attraction and retention. Dr. Wilson earned her PhD in educational leadership at Iowa State University. She also has a master's in education from Western Illinois University and dual bachelor's degrees in public relations and advertising from Northern Arizona University, right? I already told you, right? Amazing. Through qualitative research focused on understanding diversity, applied leadership experience, and her extensive community service, Dr. Wilson is ready, willing, and prepared to share her knowledge, hence the birth of her consulting company, Iman Consulting. She's deeply committed to inspiring true inclusive leadership and building practices that create bridges and pathways for all people to have rich work experiences. Simply put, she believes we spend too much time, for most of us over 40 hours a week, away from the people we love and the things that we love to do in order to be in a work environment that doesn't necessarily foster inclusion through sound leadership. And she has solutions for that pain point, right, that many of us have. So I want you to welcome to I Can't, Dr. LaDrina Wilson. How are you doing today?
I am doing just fine. Thanks for asking. How are you?
I am doing well. Thank you for joining us today.
Of course. Thanks for having me. When you reached out, I was like, oh, I get to talk to Dr. T again.
Right. So on that note, right, I definitely wanted to share a little bit about how we, and my windows got a little light in the way, how we met sort of and how the universe sort of brought us together, right? And so I don't even remember what year it was, but it's been a few years ago. It was pre-pandemic, right? And you were interviewing for a position at a previous institution where I worked, and it was a vice president position. And I remember sitting in on the forums, right, the vice president forums where you were a finalist, and saying to myself, Cicely, like, you need to know this lady. You need to get to know this lady because there was something about you that I said, yeah, we definitely need to connect. I feel sort of a common vibe there. And I was very impressed by the information that was shared about your professional background, but as well, just sort of your presence, the way you carried yourself, your responses to the questions. It was very evident that you had a genuine love for students and student success and wanting to support and help students. And it was just great all the way around. And so I knew that there was something there that required me to make that connection. And I want to say, I ended up emailing you, right? Did I end up emailing you?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
You found me on Facebook, you and actually a couple others,
Okay.
um, which was also really interesting. And when you think about how things come to fruition and the things that don't, it is always life is just a miraculous journey. I mean,
Yeah.
I didn't get the job. And was actually quite surprised by it. But then after I kind of dealt with it, I realized, like, for me, I'm a person of faith. And I realized that that wasn't for me at that time for a reason,
Right.
right? And but I found you,
Right.
and I have found some others from that engagement and that experience. And I grew. So here we are today. I got my own business, and I couldn't imagine. Actually, I was just thinking about this earlier today. I'm like, I don't know if I could ever go back and work for anybody.
Oh, yeah. Amen. Say that again, because that's where I am. That's the same sort of feeling, right? I have as well. And I do want to say, like, you were a finalist, and the person who ended up getting the job was also a boss woman of worth. So I would say, there's nothing lost there, that it really was a tough decision. And I feel like, kind of just what you said, the person who did get the job, there was a time and a place where that person was necessary. Um, and hopefully I need to get her on an episode, actually, because like I said, she's a boss woman of worth as well. But let's talk a little bit about that, right? Like, so that particular experience, you didn't get that job, but then over the next few months, next year, you started to see some things unfold professionally for yourself. So let's talk a little bit about how all of that laid out, and how that connects to the journey for building your consulting business.
Yeah. So, at the time when all that was going on, I had just finished my PhD and was really looking forward to whatever the next chapter of my life looked like. And you have a vision, and I'm a planner, so I had a roadmap, right? Right. But God had other plans. I was a finalist in a few other searches, and I did accept a position. And then, of course, that opened up some other opportunities, and then COVID.
Right.
So the position that I accepted was in the state of Illinois, and Illinois' COVID protocol. I live in Iowa, so I'm like on a border community where I could throw a rock and hit Illinois. But the way Iowa handled COVID versus Illinois were just dramatically different.
Hmm.
And so think about COVID restrictions like California. That's how Illinois was.
Okay.
And Iowa was probably more like Texas, right? So like,
Gotcha.
right. So you can imagine kind of the disparity in how it was handled. And as you shared, my passion for so many years, and if I had to say I miss one thing about working for people, is my students. That's
Mm,
and my team that
I
supported
agree.
me. Yeah, that would be the one. Those are the people that I miss the most. And we were basically in a situation where we had to keep students out of the building. So as you were reading my bio and you were saying opening doors and access for people to education, I do feel like education is a way that people can begin to change their lives and kind of take control of their lives.
Oh, of course.
And COVID required me to make sure students didn't come into the building. So I was living this life in this job that I thought was going to be my dream job, that was really counterintuitive to everything I had come to grow to understand was my calling.
Mm,
And in my most reflective moments, I can be emotionally and intellectually honest with myself and say, that was my calling for a time. And I had been fighting something. I had been fighting fear of failure. I had been
mm.
fighting probably this feeling of like putting myself, being very vulnerable and potentially being rejected, because I've always had an entrepreneurial spirit. always had that. When I was in second grade, I made a stationery business and I had a team of people that worked with me and we handcrafted stationery. And so
Wow.
I've always had like a side hustle or a gig because that's my spirit, right? And so as things got really challenging personally, I have 4 daughters, so we're all at home during COVID. And there was no separation between where my home life ended and my work life began, and vice versa. The way that I created space for myself to feel whole and to feel well was to dive into this concept of this business
Mm,
that I had been toying around with while I was working on my PhD, but genuinely did not put the effort in out of fear. And so I got with one of my friends and I talked with him for a while, and he's like, let's just do a website. Like, you don't have to do anything beyond that. Just give it some thought. We'll put a website together and kind of see what happens. And honey, I got that website together. I went live on December 31st of 2020.
okay.
And by March of 2021, I was at a position where I was like, there's no way I could do this full time, and or even part time and still do my job. And so I made the decision
Nice.
to go full time and jump right in.
I love that. I like the whole you just destiny and you know pushing past that fear of failure, which I want to touch on that a little bit. But going back to that idea of similar energies and matching energies, because I really felt the same way when I left higher education. Like, I love students, and that had been the thing that had kept me there for so long, right? And being able to serve in a way where um, it just felt very natural, right, to serve students, and to be able to in some instances also see the fruition of that, um, and then to get to a point where it's like, well, the things that I love about this and that I'm passionate about are giving me this much, and then there's all this other stuff that really is overpowering what I'm getting back, and you know that proportion eventually got so out of touch with where I wanted it to be that the spirit was like, look, if you don't move, I'm gonna move you. So even with that fear there, it's like you gotta move, you gotta move when it's time to move.
Right, right.
Go
And
ahead.
the interesting part is you can only disregard that is for so long. And either you're going to take a leap and figure out what that is, right? Or you are going to have this imbalance. And so if you decide to ignore that feeling, that overwhelming feeling of, you might not even be able to put your finger on and describe what it is, but there's either, it might be a longing or a feeling of, oh gosh, just unrest, right? Where it's like, I know I should be doing more. I know I have something else that I'm supposed to give. And you can distract yourself as much as you want to try to tiptoe around it. But
Right.
when it's yours and you don't claim it, you're not going to feel whole. You're not going to
Mm-mm,
feel well.
mm-mm. And other things won't work out the way they're supposed to either, right? Like other things feel out of balance as well because it's like, okay, I'm not where I'm supposed to be.
Yeah, yeah. I recently was, interacting with one of my clients and describing what I call as the Sunday night blues. So this individual is really good at their job, loves what they do, but they can't even enjoy their weekend all the way because come Sunday, you're like, okay, I got to like emotionally and mentally prepare for what to expect on Monday. Even though you're good at your work, you might be knocking it out of the ballpark, but there might be things happening in your work environment that are just creating that unrest because you're not where you're called to be anymore. And, I think back on my fear that prevented me. I probably should have been doing what I'm doing now 3 years ago, right? When I was interviewing for that job that I didn't get, I should have been probably pursuing this, right? And in March, I had a particular perspective, March of 2021, when I kind of hit that tipping point where it's like, I don't know if I can manage this role, as an employee full-time and really give to this work like I need to. I had a particular prospective client that approached me, and I was like, wow, this scope of work is going to be huge. And I'm either going to have to tell them no, or I'm going to have to pull the trigger and just do this. So in my mind, I was like, okay, I'm going to do it. Do you know they didn't sign a contract until February of 2022?
Huh.
It was so many iterations, so many conversations. And it seemed like at March of 2021, it felt like I was really approaching the finish line. But that's how God works. And that's how the universe works, right? Like whatever your belief system is like, even though I was operating in fear and was like, okay, I'm going to take this leap, that didn't work out
Mhm,
for a whole nother year. So many other things did, because I was walking the walk that I was supposed to be walking.
mhm,
Right? Like I'm using the gifts, I'm using the knowledge that I've gained, I'm using my professional preparation for my purpose. So it
mhm.
all came together.
I love that. Yes. And again, I feel the same way that, I probably should have left much sooner than I did. But thinking back on it, mindset is so important, right? And having the right mindset to take advantage of opportunities, to know your value, to know your worth, and to understand the path that you should be walking. Like there's so many pieces of it that are definitely dependent on mindset, I would say. And
Yeah.
so without the right mindset, right, things are not going to fall into place the way that they should either. And so I want to talk a little bit about that because we've, discussed the fear of failure that you felt like you had to push past. And so as it relates to your work that you do now, right? How do you help people to get past that? And specifically, how do you help people pair their inspiration with the skills that they have, their intrinsic skills, in order to find success in their career, in their business, their professional lives, and in some ways, even in their personal lives, right? Because if they're going to do what they need to do in their career, there are some pieces of who they are as a person that have got to be where they need it to be. So, talk a little bit about that, the work that you do, and your own process with pushing past that fear of failure, but how you do that with clients too.
Okay. Okay. So one thing, you've given me a little credit where maybe I shouldn't have it. You said that I've been able to push past my fear of failure. I haven't. What I have decided is, in this work that I'm doing as an entrepreneur, I'm afraid every day.
Mm,
I'm afraid every day. Are they going to accept my proposal? Am I going to be able to meet that deadline? Am I going to say the wrong thing? Am I going to get canceled? Am I going to meet a certain person's expectations? I am afraid every single day. And what I have decided to do is embrace that, right?
mm,
I have decided to say, I have taken this leap. I have decided that I'm going to move this direction. And it is a little less certain than the path that I've had the 15 years before that, because I was going to get a paycheck every 2 weeks, no matter if my feet, hit the ground in the morning. I was sick, I still got paid. It was a holiday, I still got paid. Like, right, there's some security that comes with that cadence of work, right? I know what my role is and responsibilities are, so long as I do that. And some folks don't even have to do it well. You just have to do it. You're still going to get that job security. Um, but once I decided that I don't let fear dictate or stop me from doing something, is how I was able to move forward. Right. So that's what I do with my clients. It's like we work at, what are you actually afraid of? Okay. What are the things that you can do to either overcome that, or can you live with that? Can you live with that fear? Right? Is it a real fear? Is it a reality? Like, there was a time period, Dr. T, I kid you not, I got to the point where my mom, because my mom is like she's my best friend. She's also my biggest cheerleader. I would call and I'd be like, Mom, such and such accepted my proposal. And she's like, probably after like the 6 or 7 times, she was like, yeah, that's what they're gonna do. Because each time I was like, I can't believe they picked me, right? And So for me, there is a balance of being a little bit humble,
Mhm.
so that you can stay in that competitive space of knowing you need to push and grow, but acknowledging that fear is okay as long as you don't let it stop you.
Mm. I
Okay.
love that.
And so I ask people, is it something they can live with? Can they manage the idea that there may be a little uncertainty in taking a leap in entrepreneurship or even in really like leaning into your leadership style? Because a lot of times I'm working with people who are in a profession who just need coaching within their, to better themselves and to improve their team's performance. So in those relationships, what I try to do is also tap into not what makes you just, not just what makes you afraid, but when you feel the strongest, when you feel the most capable, how is it that you're showing up? What is it that you're doing? What are those situations and circumstances? And once we can identify, you feel the strongest when you're, working within a team and providing support and guidance, but not giving the answers, like empowering people.
Mhm.
You feel the strongest when you're showing up and offering solutions and having this out of the box thinking in a boardroom setting. Or maybe you feel the strongest when you show up and you're the most prepared, right? Because you've read all the reports and you know the information. How do we replicate that? How do
Nice.
we replicate that over and how do we scale that, right? And so I try to help people. I think a lot of times, Dr. T, we have successes and we don't always know why. I think each person that I work with has their own secret sauce. That's their magic. Like you are the magic, right? So what is it that you're doing that's the magic and how can we systematize it? Because oftentimes we just go through the motions and we have successes and we don't reflect on those successes well enough to break them down and create a system that works for us to continuously build on those successes.
Love that.
Does that make sense?
Mhm. Yeah, and I think, folks listening to this will really understand how that works, right? That I think, yeah, a lot of us, there are things that go well for us or things that we do well, and we never sit and stop and think, well, what was it that worked well? What was it that was a strength of mine that was reflected in that process? And like you said, how do I replicate that? How do I make sure that I embed whatever it was that helped me to be successful here, that I integrate that into future experiences, as a way to balance out, right, that fear of failure, as you mentioned. Like the fear is going to be there, perhaps, if you stay humble, or that sense of, what some people feel is anxiety or whatever they might call it. But if I know the things that help me to be successful and I know that I can replicate that, right? Then, like you said, I have this process, I have a system in place that is going to increase the likelihood that I can continue to be successful.
Yes.
So I love that. I love the way you just laid that out so very simply.
And I work with a lot of women, primarily in terms of coaching, and not by design. It's just kind of happened that way. But we as women can easily point to the things that we've done wrong. I
Hmm.
mean, and we could quite naturally rattle off a list. I mean, if I asked a person, what are your weaknesses? I will get a comprehensive list that makes me uncomfortable. Right. Like
Right.
after one is like, just okay, stop, that's enough. Because I see your magic and you don't. But if I ask the inverse of that and ask someone to tell me what their strengths are, there's a pause. There's always a pause. And it's a much shorter list. And it's not because the list is actually shorter, it's because we don't give ourselves enough space to reflect. We don't give ourselves enough credit to feel confident, and we don't give ourselves enough grace. And so I just think that once a woman decides to lean into those things that are her magic, we're nearly unstoppable,
Mm.
right? We are nearly unstoppable. And so it's like, how do you work with people to lessen, to shrink that voice of fear, to shrink that voice of inadequacy, to shrink that voice of, well, these are my weaknesses and I want to try to make them strengths, right? Like, let's shrink that and let's work on what you're actually working with you,
Right.
that kind of thing. So that's what I focus on in my coaching.
Yeah. And to that point, since you brought up that gender piece, I think for so many women, there is also that fear of not being assertive, not being too bold, right? And how that comes across. You know, I can't really talk about what I'm good at or what my strengths are. Like people don't like that, right? And I think part of that is back to that idea of mindset, right? Shifting the mindset that we have about talking about our strengths and how we talk about our strengths in a way that is comfortable enough for us, right? That we don't feel like it's flaunting or bragging, if that's what folks feel like is a problem. But can you still talk about the strengths that you have, talk about the skills that you've been blessed with, and how you can use those things to serve other people, which for me is really important, right? Not just to say I'm good at something, but why was I given these abilities, right? Is to be
Right.
able to serve others. And so how do we help women find ways to talk about those strengths in a way that they feel is healthy for them?
Yeah. So I actually just wrote a blog that I'm going to post, because I'm from the Midwest, and I would say a characteristic of people from my region is this kind of humbleness, right? Um, we're not very, of course these are generalizations, but we don't, you won't see a lot of people in the Midwest like flaunt their wealth. You won't see them talk about themselves in a positive light. It's just this very humble, unassuming type of kind of personality. Not on the whole, right?
Right.
But generally speaking, and I would put Chicago as kind of an outlier. And I
Well, you
say,
got to point out Chicago.
well, I had to say that because my family is from there, and a lot of them are far from humble. But what I would say is, like, one of the things that I think, a quality that women possess that is similar to this regionalism that I'm describing is, this feeling of not wanting to be your own champion, right?
Mm,
And so I just wrote up this piece on the humble brag. Like, what is your humble brag? What does that look like? And quite frankly, the way a woman navigates that is different than a man from my perspective. There are some
mhm,
similarities, but the best thing that we can do as women is tell each other stories.
mm,
And so, first thing we did before we started recording, right? I said, Dr. T, what can I do to help you? What can I do to, I
mhm,
know that I have a responsibility to the women who are in my circle and to the women who are in my life to be their champions, to be that voice when they maybe aren't able to or aren't willing to, or maybe it's not appropriate for them to be, because there are certain situations where it's not, or perhaps it would have greater impact if it came from someone else. But the other thing that I always caution people on is, if you don't tell your story, someone else will.
right.
So at some point, you have to drop little nuggets of what it is that you're doing. So there is synergy among the story that's being told about you. You create your brand, not someone else.
Right.
And so we live in a society where, branding anymore is a minimum expectation in professionalism.
Mm,
So own that brand, right? And if you don't, someone else will.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, and even, for women who are not necessarily entrepreneurs, right? Women feel like, well, I don't have a business, I don't have a brand. Well, yes, you do. Even if you're not an entrepreneur or a business owner, we all have a brand, right? Whatever image it is that we're taking out into the world. And I've heard this said before, if you don't tell your story, like you said, someone else is going to tell it, and you probably aren't going to like the story that someone else tells, right? The way that they tell it. And so it is to our advantage to find a way to share that narrative, that journey, whatever label you want to put there, that brand with the world.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
I spent a number of years at a particular higher education institution. And as I started thinking about my entrepreneurial journey while I was in grad school, um, one of my kids came home and said, gosh, must have been when she was in 6th grade. Uh, I Googled your name and oh my gosh, all this stuff came up. So I Googled my name and I saw what my brand was. And my
Mm,
brand was that college. I
mm,
had I had given my brand was so synonymous. The good works that I had done, the community efforts that I had made, the relationships that I had built were not LaDrina's.
we're not your own.
They were not my own. And I don't do things, I don't generally move in a way that is about my personal gain. Um, Although, obviously as an entrepreneur, there is some of that, right? If I'm in a competitive process, of course, I want to win, right? But I think a lot of the work that I primarily do has been about service to others. And I think even if in a for-profit model, you can still be about service to others. But what I realized was I didn't want to be like I didn't know if I was getting back from the college what I was giving, right? When I looked at my name and I Googled my name and I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
it looks like they're doing so much. And I knew actually what I was doing.
Right.
And so that still wasn't enough for me to say, I'm going to pull the trigger on my business. I just had that in the back of my mind.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I move now, I feel a certain degree, and I was allowed to soar in my various roles that I've had. I've always worked for great organizations that never made me feel like I was stifled in any way.
Nice.
But now I feel like I'm moving in my brand and in my legacy.
Mm,
And I can sign my work and think about my legacy, not an institution,
right.
right? And so what I want to do as I work with people is help them figure out what their mark is, what is their legacy. And for some people, that is directly related to the work they do within an institution.
Right.
And for other people, it's turning a gig into their life. It is signing their work with excellence
Mm,
and with their brand. And through our relationships, through our relationship building and getting to know one another, and me kind of finding what are the things that make them tick and reminding them to lean into those things. Um, I've seen a lot of people have a lot of success and a lot of breakthroughs. And that for me doesn't feel self-serving. It feels
right.
very, very rewarding.
Oh, definitely. Yes. Oh, I loved all of that. I laughed at the beginning of that because I recently had a similar experience with my son. We were out at lunch, I think, and he's like, "Why are you on the internet?" And I was like, "What do you mean? Like, I'm not on my phone right now. What are you talking about?" He's like, "No, we were looking up people. We were Googling people the other day at school, and one of his friends, Aiden looked you up, and you were all on the internet." And I was like, "Okay, well, show me what you mean, right?" So he like
Yeah.
types my name into Google, and I was like, "Oh, okay, I get it now." And so then I kind of had to explain to him, like, "Oh,
Right.
mom has her own business." And so that's how but similarly, I would say probably last year prior, whenever I would go in and do a search for myself, pretty much, yeah, all these primary searches that popped up were things that were connected to a previous institution, right? As opposed to things that were connected to my business in any way. And so I definitely concur with you about that. And, each of us, again, giving thought to who are we, right? Number one, and then what is it that we're putting out into the world that people are able to see and receive.
Yeah.
Um, and being very intentional about that, right? I'm very much on this path now of how can I be more intentional about things in my life as opposed to just allowing things to happen. And so when it comes to that image or that brand or that perception, even, what are things that you're doing to create some intentionality with that as opposed to feeling like you're, sort of a victim to how people see you and interpret you?
right. Well, and you know what the other thing is? I describe having lots of opportunities in my employment history, and I have. And it's not lost on me that I created that through the relationships, and also I had certain leaders who were okay with that. But that's not everybody's story, right? Like,
Right,
I recognize, especially as I go into these corporations, nonprofits, and work with people, and I look at workplace dynamics, there's all these politics that prohibit people from really doing the work they're best at. And so you got employees that are spending a substantial amount of time just trying to navigate the politics,
right,
and it's preventing them from like getting good work done. They get a good product out, but it's not necessarily the best that it would be. And it's certainly not as efficient because of the emotional bandwidth that they have to put toward playing games, right?
right.
And so when I think about how I work with people and think about the legacy that they want to leave, right? I have to remind people that you're bigger than this. You're bigger than this moment, right? This challenge, this circumstance, this situation that you're trying to navigate. And so, do you need to break out of this?
Mm,
And if you do need to break out of this, what does that look like? How can you find that balance? Maybe you have to keep a job, or maybe you're a leader within this organization or sandwiched somewhere in the middle and trying to navigate it. What do you need to bring? What other project do you need to take on personally or professionally to balance the games that you're playing over here so that you can feel whole?
right.
And it gets people to recenter themselves on what's most important to them, right?
Mhm.
And as I'm kind of saying this out loud, I'm describing like how Iman consulting came about. It was like, okay, I'm this heavy lift of this, all things COVID. It doesn't feel like my work. Here's this other thing I'm going to do that makes me feel whole. And it felt so natural, and it felt way easier than it had ever felt
Right.
in the years past, because it was what I was doing to feel whole. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. So then, in thinking about some of the things that you get back, right, in your work, share with us one or two pros and cons to being an entrepreneur, a woman entrepreneur, a woman of color entrepreneur, a mother entrepreneur, whichever of those labels you feel like is most salient for you. But give us a couple of the awesome things, the great things, but also the challenges that you've had to learn to navigate along the way.
Yeah. So I think I was thinking about this a couple weeks ago, not in preparation for this, but I think I shared with you, Dr. T, I'm really working on my personal retreat. Like, I'm dealing with myself right now in a way that I have needed to for the past couple of months, but the
Mm,
conspiracy of busyness has not allowed me to. And one thing I would say is I don't think about myself as a Black woman business owner until someone reminds me. Okay. So um I had a circumstance. How can I describe this? I'm trying to be as diplomatic as possible. I had a circumstance where I'm part of an organization that does grant making. And I guess one of the organizations, a prospective client, had submitted one of my proposals as part of their grant submission, which I was not aware that that's how they planned on funding the work. No big deal, right? You recuse yourself from it and you step back. No big deal.
mhm,
So this particular organization talked about pulling that grant application and not funding it at all, or not scoring it at all, because my business was associated with it. And I
mhm.
thought to myself, surely this seems odd. There's a process, right? Like, I'm not voting on it. I'm not contributing to. I mean, like, obviously that makes sense, right? You step away from it, you recuse. That's
Right.
right, an ethical thing to do, and I'm pretty sure it was in our bylaws even. And there was all of this deliberation around whether or not the funding could come to my business by way of this nonprofit application. And then I thought, I'm a sole proprietor, but this is a board of prominent people in the area. And pretty sure I know that person is building an entire multi-million-dollar building for a nonprofit in the community. Pretty sure this person that was on the board furnished, an- an entire institution that was built. Like their company
Mm.
did the design and the furnishing for that building. And somehow we were able to make that work. But now all of a sudden,
Uh-huh.
when the money's coming to me, it's like, wait, is this right? And the only thing that was different was me being a Black woman.
Mm.
And so there's this higher level of like scrutiny that, and to be quite honest with you, what's ironic about it is I can't even remember what the proposal was, but it couldn't have been more than, maybe $6,000 or $7,000. And these projects that I'm describing to you that these other people probably, I'm sure they recused themselves from, but there was never a pause, right? Like it was just
Right.
automatic. Multi-million-dollar projects,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like if you're going to build an entire building and they're doing an entire capital campaign for it, it's because it costs millions of dollars to build this building.
Right.
Nobody flinched. So I do think there are moments where my value is questioned, in part as a Black woman, but also because I don't have an institution behind me, right?
Mm.
Like I think that people don't necessarily want to put money into the hands of a person. Now, if it's
Right.
a business, they don't look at it that way, but at the end of the day, you are still, so that owner of that construction business is on this board.
Right.
That person benefits from, right?
Right.
So I think there is there are moments where as a Black woman, people will call into question your worth or your value. I try to compartmentalize that and not, quite frankly, to lead in that way, to operate in that way every day, would be emotionally exhausting and literally I can't.
Right.
Like I can't, and I wouldn't be able to go on, right? So I
Yeah.
don't let that dictate how I move, but I'm aware of it. So I do think that entering spaces where your value is questioned,
Mm.
especially when you're doing work around diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is part of my business model, that's a very challenging piece. I think the second thing that I would say is really hard is I am a mother and I have 4 daughters. And while this entrepreneurial lifestyle has provided me a high degree of flexibility, I'm still navigating the challenge of how I show up for my family. And I think they think because for 15 years they've seen me go into a job, they think that I'm a stay-at-home mom.
Right.
Like, they haven't figured out that like just because I don't
Mm-hmm.
go into the office like I did in the way that I did every single day, that like I'm at their disposal.
Right.
And so that has been an interesting challenge that I'm still navigating, right? I love the flexibility of being able to go to my kids' program at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday, that she's singing at school or something like that,
Right.
without even questioning it, right? Like I can build my week around it, and not let anybody down. But I also have to know when to say like, hey, honey, I can't just drop your lunch off because you forgot this time. Or my family dynamics have changed in that way.
Right.
They expect certain things of me that they never would have asked before. And so I don't know if I'm responsible for that or what, but we're still trying to figure that out. That has been a challenge. And you asked for 2 things that are kind of like the pros.
Mm-hmm.
I've never felt more liberated than I feel now.
Mm.
I felt a high degree of authenticity in my work that I did. I think that was part of what made me stand out, is people never had to guess where they stood with me. People never had to guess what was on my mind. I wasn't wearing it on my sleeve, but I was forthright, forthcoming, I should say, with people and operated with honesty and integrity. Now I show up. I feel like the fullness of my identity is just beginning to blossom. And that I mean, I have so much joy in that.
Mm.
Um, the other thing is, and this is probably even more important than the last one that I just said to you. When you decide to move into the space of really owning who you are, whether it's through entrepreneurship or through your leadership style, you become more creative. You start
Mm.
tapping into parts of you that you didn't even know were there. So I have got this engine of ideas that are constantly, I don't even have enough time,
Ugh.
right? And I
Mhm.
don't know if it's because I know I have to work a certain kind of way to have the income and lifestyle that I want, which of course you did that when you work for somebody, but there's something different about your entrepreneurial engine. Once you start down this path and you have a couple of wins, your brain goes to places that you never
Yes.
would have. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes, exactly.
And it's
Yes.
like, oh my gosh, I got to keep a pad by my nightstand because I'm like, ooh, that would be so dope to do. Oh man, that would be so bad if I'm able to pull that off, right?
Right.
Like I am breathing different air.
Mm.
I'm breathing different air.
Yes.
And what I'm exhaling is excellence.
Mm.
And so I find so much joy being in that space. Now it's like, how do I get to implement all that?
Right. How do I find the time and the resources to do it all?
You
Yeah.
know, to hire more people, do I, or if I start hiring people, does it start feeling and looking more like what it did
Right.
when so
Mhm.
I'm at this weird inflection point.
Yeah, yeah. I totally agree with that. Like, I don't think there's no deficit of ideas, right? It's just a matter of the implementation. And I think some of that is related to what you mentioned earlier, when we're a part of organizations and the bureaucracy and those kinds of things, I think over time it starts to stifle some of that creativity because we realize like how many, you know, different avenues do I have to go through just to get this implemented? And there's too
And
many
is it
people
worth
that
it?
have to approve it. And
Yeah, is
right,
it worth it? It's like, are they even going to appreciate it?
right, right. So I think that stifles a lot of it when we're a part of organizations that aren't supporting that sort of innovation and creativity. And as you become unshackled from that, right, you can get back to that place of creativity that you were maybe that you had before. So.
Well, and so, yeah, I mean, the maybe, right? There are some people who are going to be more creative than others. That's just
Mhm.
natural. But I think about us how we were when we were children. I think imagination and creativity is innate.
Yep.
The way that we played with children as we were children, the way that we imagined possibility and life, not just a work experience, but life grounds us in reality. But I think our natural state is this playland of imagination.
Yeah.
And when you work for yourself, you start some your mind goes back to that place in a way that I'm probably not even doing a good job of describing it. It's a feeling um that no one could have prepared me for because I'm
Mhm.
like, whew, yeah. So sorry, I'm getting
Awesome.
excited thinking about it.
Oh no, that's awesome. I love that. So kind of along with that, then tell us who LaDrina is when she's not at work. For those who are listening, we've heard a lot about what you do as a part of your consulting business and some of your career journey. But when you're not officially working, I know as an entrepreneur, there's a lot of times where we're kind of making money even when it seems like we're not working.
Yeah.
But when you're not officially at work, who are you? What are you like?
Oh gosh. Well, that's the other piece. I'm a lot. I thought, like I said, I thought I was walking in this very authentic space, but I'm a lot more congruent with who I am, whether I'm at on or off, right?
Mm.
But when I'm not on the job, I have 4 daughters. I have a wonderful husband who I have been married to. July 1st will be 16 years. He is he's my heartbeat, my biggest champion, always has my back. He's always down for the ride and the journey because I'm always cooking up something crazy. So He'll just roll with me. But I spend a lot of time with my girls. They're in competitive sports. I think your son is in sports as well. So you
Mhm.
understand like all that goes into that. So pretty much every weekend I'm with them, which that's also been interesting because I did tons of community service. And now that the girls have entered this phase where I've got a 17-year-old down to an 8-year-old, and I don't have as much time for my service as I once had. And so that's been interesting to navigate because that's been a big part of my identity. I'm a Delta, so we're women of service. And my mom is a Delta, so she took me to every community service, everything that you can think of. I also do some criminal justice reform organizing. And so that's been a unique part of my journey more recently, establishing dignity for those that are incarcerated or those who are formerly incarcerated, and being in community with people who otherwise have been shunned. Been a deep passion of mine over the last couple of years. And
Nice.
yeah, I enjoy my friends. I have a few. I have a huge family, so it's hard to have like time for friends.
Right.
But I would say that I am the type of person, I'm very much an extrovert. So I can sit down and watch a movie and it can be funny. But if I got somebody next to me, it's even more funny.
Right.
Right. So I love peopling. But I also really enjoy just holding space for a cup of coffee on my deck and enjoying the sun coming up. So I don't know if that makes me interesting or not. I'm probably like most people, I would say. um I love hip hop and gospel. You can judge me, if you want.
Hey, it's an awesome combination if you ask me.
I was bumping Jonathan McReynolds this morning on my run, but it could have been Wayne 2 weeks ago. You never
Right.
know what you're gonna get. But that's pretty much who I am.
Awesome. I love that. And I would say, when we are supporting our kids, supporting our family, it's service as well. And I'm thinking about my son and how I think this week he's supposed to bring the snacks for his basketball game, right? And so I think the service looks a little different, but it's
Yeah.
still a type of community service. But to your point, thinking about how to navigate that and how to shape those things that we're passionate about and that we want to make sure to make a part of our lives and our experiences, right? We have to continue to be thoughtful about those things and how we want to continue to integrate those pieces, those different pieces of our lives, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I want to thank you so much for this conversation, allowing us to learn a little bit more about the work that you do. I think there are going to be folks who listen to this who are like, oh my gosh, like I need that. I need that sort of help and support in my life and my career. So share your social media info with us, your contact info, and anything that you're currently working on that listeners may be able to connect with.
Okay. Well, I think we spent a lot of time talking about kind of coaching and that type of thing, but that's actually probably of my kind of three buckets of work. That's probably the least amount of time that I spend doing my work. I do a lot of education and training around diversity, equity, and inclusion, diversity audits, and then I would say secondary would be leadership team development, followed by the coaching and one-on-one sessions. I am working with all types of organizations, whether they're municipalities, to corporations, to nonprofits. And so I just want people to know that it's a broad scope of work that I do and that I take on. I'm excited to learn about the challenges of each unique organization. And I have a ton of different types of folks that are reaching out to me. So if you are listening to this and you think I could be a benefit to you, you are welcome to reach out. If I'm not capable or if I'm not the right person, I will refer you to someone else. I'm honest about that. It might be Dr. T that I'm referring you to because she is definitely on my list of people that you should know. But you can find me on Instagram at Iman_consulting, on Twitter at consulting_Iman or something like that, and Facebook, Iman Consult One. So that's the one thing I will say in building my business. I didn't have my brand stuff ready at the beginning. Somebody already had my name. So now I've got all these 3 different handles. But if you
Right.
find Iman Consulting, you should be able to find me, or a tech company in DC. it's me. Don't do the tech company.
Right. Okay.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for this chat. I've enjoyed your company as always.
Yes, yes. And real quick, so your ideal client or company that you want to reach out to you, can you give us a quick description of who that would be?
Yeah, I would say in terms of the coaching, I would say my ideal client is someone who either has like a side hustle or a gig that they're trying to really scale up and maybe make it their full-time position. Somebody who is in a leadership role, maybe not necessarily emerging leader, but either has some experience with leadership and supervision all the way up to C-suite.
Okay.
And then in terms of the DEI work that I don't do one and done. So if folks are looking for, someone to come in and talk about a specific topic, I can do that. But my passion lies in helping affect organizational change. And that doesn't come through one delivery of a professional development. So I do long-term education and training with companies and also help them develop their DEI plans. So my ideal clients look like social service agencies, corporations of probably 100 employees or less. Although I have a couple that I've Fortune 500 companies that I've worked with specific departments and that type of thing. So I'm open. It does have to be a good cultural fit. If it's not, I will definitely make that referral. But we have to have the same goals of long-term change, not just a transactional type of engagement.
Right. Awesome. All right. Well, I definitely wanted to get that information out there. So again, folks who are listening can say, hey, is that me or not? And, it sounds like there's something there that would be helpful for me and the needs of my organization or me personally. So we want folks to be able to specifically pinpoint that you are the person that they should reach out to for the needs that they have. So thank you again for your time. It has been amazing. And I will say that this was, a little bit of an excuse just to be able to connect with you since we stay so busy and we have a hard time connecting. Having you on the podcast was, a little bit of a selfish opportunity for us to be able to connect once again. So again, thank you for your time. I definitely appreciate the time that you've taken out of your schedule to be here today and to share with us. And I'm just looking forward to producing this episode and getting it out to the masses so they can hear all the great things that you're doing.
All right.
All right. So it has. Yes, thank you all. It has been another great episode of I Can. I look forward to connecting with you all again soon on a future topic. Until then, make it a great day and we will see you all and hear you all very soon. Thank you for listening to the show. This has been I Can't with Dr. T. Don't forget to reach out to us on your preferred social media platform at Dr. T Medley on all platforms, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok, on the web, drtmedley.com, or by email, info@drtmedley.com. Be sure to let us know what topics you'd like to hear and what you'd like to talk about on future episodes. Until next time, make it a great day.